Hello and welcome. Breaking news edition today on i24 News. I'm Sarah Shalala. We're live from our Tel Aviv studios now, bringing you all the latest developments from Israel, the Gaza Strip and inside the West Bank. Well, dozens of rockets raining down on communities across southern and central Israel, and about a few hours ago and moments ago as well, 2 times today, sirens were held right here in Tel Aviv. Staff in this i24 News building ran to shelter those rockets fired by the Gaza militant group Palestinian Islamic Jihad, but were intercepted luckily by the Iron Dome system. The operation was first launched by the IDF, codenamed Breaking Dawn, a campaign which started Friday afternoon, now into its 3rd day, to take out some PIJ targets. Now with news just in, both Israel and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad have confirmed a ceasefire from 11:30 p.m. local time. The militant group has so far fired about 1,000 rockets into Israel. No casualties so far among Israelis, but the death toll in Gaza since the beginning of this operation stands at 41. Straight to our Pierre Clochendler now, i24 News correspondent, is stationed for us at Netiv HaAzara on the northern tip of the border there with the Gaza Strip. Pierre, give us a sense of the scene around you. I know you've been stationed there for quite a few hours into the night now, and it's is it quiet? Is something else going on? Just give us an idea of what's really happening.
Well, there's 28 minutes to go before the ceasefire gets into effect, and we've heard and we're still hearing some booms of either explosions of mortar fire or interceptions. Not far away from here, if we hear them, probably at around 5 miles away from where we are, in communities which are facing the northern Gaza Strip. Here it's quiet, but again, I hear the booms. So we have 28 minutes to go before that ceasefire takes effect, and hopefully it will remain quiet. There's been a trickle for the past couple of hours of mainly short-range rockets or mortar fire on the central sector of the communities, the Israeli communities facing the Gaza Strip. Now, the wind, the bad wind, is receding from the central sector and going up to the northern sector where we are. We hope that the wind will recede again, and that in 27 minutes from now, the residents will be able to go out of the shelters.
Pierre, in those 27 minutes left to go till this ceasefire comes into effect at 11:30 p.m. local time, what do you think the terms of this pact will actually entail?
Well, you know, Israel's position has been consistent, saying that calm will be returned with calm. Israel says that they've achieved most targets that they planned. On the other hand, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, relayed by pro-Palestinian, pro-Hezbollah El Mayadin channel, have argued that Israel has promised the release of Bassem al-Saadi, who is a senior operative of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad based in Jenin, who was arrested. Israel would have promised the release of a hunger strike from Palestinian Islamic Jihad, who is in Israeli jail, and alleviating the closure which Israel and Egypt have been inflicting since basically Hamas took over the Gaza Strip in 2007, as well as allowing fuel to feed the main generator. A lot of promises, but no confirmation from Israel.
Pierre Clochendler there, thank you so much. We'll be crossing back to you a little bit later, obviously, during our broadcast. Well, for more now, Martin Hibbel, political analyst and international security analyst, joins me on the line from Toronto in Canada. Martin, thank you so much for coming onto the show. We've been seeing several small protests in several locations across Israel against the IDF's operation on PIJ targets. One just happened in Jaffa, where our studio is based, a few hours ago. Some others happened in Haifa, which is a northern town in Israel. You can hear Israeli Arabs clapping and cheering in the video that was released as well of these protests. What's your initial reaction to that video, if you were able to come across it?
Well, I think that this particular confrontation will end before internal strife between Arabs and Jews in Israel or elsewhere gets out of hand. I think that this is a very short-term strike. And I think it's actually, Islamic Jihad can come out and say they're getting all sorts of concessions. It's rather nebulous. But the bottom line is that Israel has taken out a severe blow against the leadership of Islamic Jihad. And so any followers are going to feel very vulnerable and more hesitant when it comes to attacking because Israel's shown that it's going right for the head of this organization. And the fact that this is a wider war, really, between Iran and Israel, Israel, and its Arab allies. It's another step in this wide confrontation. So I don't think these demonstrations are going to have any long-lasting effect for now.
There was also a misfiring by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad into the Gaza Strip. One incident that we know of which went horribly wrong on a refugee camp in Jabalia, which killed and injured innocent civilians, Martin, including 5 children. How many more have also been misfired that we still don't even know of, do you think?
There could be quite a few. The fact is that there was a misfire, and the fact that Palestinian children are killed, that doesn't, that in international terms, that doesn't look, that doesn't translate into, oh, the Palestinians killed them by accident. It's Israel's responsibility. When it comes to international framework, children dying who are Palestinian, it doesn't matter how they're killed, that's an Israeli responsibility, and that will damage Israel's standing internationally. It's collateral damage that I'm sure Israel is willing to accept when it's dealing with the political situation. It looks bad for Israel, and it translates bad. But when the plus and minus of this is all taken into consideration, first of all, it was Islamic Jihad who basically killed them by accident. And second of all, the big hits against the leadership of Islamic Jihad outweigh the costs, I think, in this case.
And in a conflict like this, Martin, one person killed, as we know, by a misfiring like this is just too much. And it's too tragic. And the amount of casualties is also very sad. But now it's left an entire community of Jabalia reeling. I'm sure there's lots of frustration on the Palestinian side as well. What do you think the humanitarian situation is like at the moment in the Gaza Strip?
Well, the humanitarian situation in Gaza has been impossible for many, many years. It's not just the results of these rockets. It's the closures, it's the siege, it's the fact they can't leave, it's the fact that it's economically retarded and backward. But all that is really a joint responsibility between Hamas, Israel, Islamic Jihad, and the fight that's been going on. It's not going to be solved by this confrontation. Suffering will continue, and as a volcano explodes here and there will be explosions and eruptions. But for now, this unending war continues, and it's largely because, at this stage, because there's backers like Iran and other countries, and a hardline Israeli policy that's ensuring that this will continue as long as Hamas and Israel don't negotiate and don't try to resolve the situation.
Martin Himmel, thank you so much. Political analyst and international security analyst joining us from Toronto in Canada. Really important to note as well that as we are on air at the moment, we're hearing sirens. The south of the country is under a red alert and sirens are going off in that part of the country. For now, though, we are off to a short break. When we do get back, of course, more on these latest developments inside the West Bank, Israel and the Gaza Strip. Don't go anywhere.
breaking news again. But there's always more to the story, especially here in the Middle East.
What's really going on in the region? Well, unless you're actually here, you can't really tell.
Join us here at the beating heart of the new Middle East
To get a true perspective on what's really going on.
Tonight on Global Eye. On the summit, the self-proclaimed free speech platform GAB at the center of attention again. Should we really have no limits at all? On the political corner, a day after demonstrators stormed parliament, what is next for Iraq's political turmoil? On the spotlight, the most important decision of the Spanish government. Every woman's body is beach ready. All of this and much more on tonight's Global Eye.
We're on the inside of political and religious passions in Jerusalem, breaking down the financial trends shaping the global economy, giving you key context, not just headlines, with the stories from Israel that touch the U.S. and those across the region with impact far beyond its borders. Catch the rundown where the Middle East meets the world.
Hello and welcome back to this breaking news edition with the latest developments out of Israel, the Gaza Strip and inside the West Bank. Operation Breaking Dawn continues. The Israeli Gaza border town of Sderot has been hit with multiple barrages of rockets, just like southern and central Israeli communities. Well, let's head to Jonathan Regev now live in the town of Sderot near the Gaza-Israeli border. Jonathan, you're stationed in a town that's been directly hit with these rocket barrages from Gaza today and yesterday. The last few moments, we've also heard some red alert sirens around the southern cities there. I'm just wondering, have you heard anything from where you're standing currently?
First of all, yes, we're speaking of ceasefire at 11:30 local time. By now, this has already been confirmed by both sides, but 11:30 is 15 minutes away, and therefore rockets are still being fired from Gaza, and the IDF is still attacking in Gaza, and this will probably go on until the final second of the final minute before 11:30 p.m. Regarding the people here, two different feelings. Specifically regarding this specific operation, great satisfaction. People here are saying, finally, Israel is the one initiating and not the one being dragged into an operation. And people here are saying it's quite simple. The Islamic Jihad was putting its squads right next to the border, trying to carry out an attack with the anti-tank squads. Israel told the Islamic Jihad loud and clear, either you remove your squads or we will do it. The squads were not removed, so Israel did it. As far as this is concerned, great, clearly satisfaction here in the city of Sderot. Finally, Israel is initiating. This is what people are saying here. But on a larger scale, the frustration, not just today, but for many, many years now, is the understanding that while this operation is over, the other one is around the corner. It may take a month, it may take a year, it may even take 2 years. But eventually, another operation will come, simply because the Gaza Strip, which is about half a mile from us, and I don't know if you were able to hear the explosions, but very loud. The Gaza Strip is about half a mile away from here, controlled by Hamas, which does not accept the presence of the Israeli state here. And as long as Hamas is there, these operations will continue. On that sense, there's a clear frustration, but at least regarding this specific operation, a lot of satisfaction here in Sderot.
I'm also really curious about the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, especially with the misfiring on Jabalia, the refugee camp. Jonathan, do you have any idea about what's really concerning the Arabs in that area?
Whatever is concerning the people there is clearly not concerning the Islamic Jihad, which is constantly firing from within a civilian population in Gaza. targeting civilian population in Israel, and we've seen many times through these 3 days that some of their missiles hit the civilian population. The humanitarian situation in Gaza is dire. This is due to the fact that Hamas is controlling the area and too many times putting a lot of strains on the population there, and those strains grew bigger now as the Islamic Jihad fired so many rockets from civilian population, many of them turning back on that civilian population itself.
Jonathan Regev, thank you so much for standing by for us there at the Gaza-Israeli border. I'm sure we'll be crossing back to you a little bit later. Well, in this latest conflict, while Israeli airstrikes have killed dozens in the Gaza Strip, not a single Israeli has been killed. The IDF now hailing a 96% success rate from Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system. Mary McAuliffe has that story.
In 36 hours, over 500 rockets were launched into Israel, mostly targeting communities along the Israel-Gaza border. The vast majority of them land like this. But many see a far more explosive end. Israel's Iron Dome air defense system engaging constantly to intercept rockets headed towards populated or high-value areas amid constant rocket fire.
I heard an air raid siren. I stopped on the side of the road. This part fell on my car. As you can see, this is part of an Iron Dome. We are strong here in Sderot. We are not afraid. We are strengthening the army. The army will do what it has to do, and we have the Iron Dome to protect us and stay strong.
The Israeli Defense Forces said Sunday morning the Iron Dome had intercepted 185 rockets from Gaza since the beginning of the operation breaking dawn on Friday afternoon, noting a 97% success rate. That's a massive improvement from earlier operations in the Gaza Strip. Used extensively along Israel's border with Gaza since it was first introduced in 2011, the IDF credits the Iron Dome with saving countless Israeli lives. Besides the almost 300 rockets that landed in open areas, the IDF says it detected 115 launches that failed to cross into Israeli territory, landing instead inside the densely populated Gaza Strip, as Israel says it did when a deadly hit in Gaza killed multiple children in Jabalia. Palestinians blamed an Israeli strike, but the IDF denied responsibility.
There is video documenting the entire thing. There was no Israeli activity in the Gaza Strip, in that area, or at that time. 1 in 4 rockets fired from Gaza towards Israel lands inside the Gaza Strip.
Now on the third day of fighting, the rockets are continuing, as are Israeli strikes in Gaza. Dozens of Palestinians have been killed, including militants, terror leaders, but also civilians, women, and children. In Israel, there have only been minor injuries and damage caused by the few missiles who managed to evade the Iron Dome.
For more insight now, I have my panel in the studio. Mary McAuliffe, our diplomatic correspondent, and Alec Pollard, our Middle East correspondent, here with me. So, Alec, can we just start with you? So, less than 15 minutes into this ceasefire actually taking effect at 11:30 p.m. local time here, we're hearing red alert sirens go off in the southern cities, some southern cities in Israel, Beersheba being one of them, and the IDF also striking in the Gaza Strip as well. And this is just 15 minutes into this ceasefire actually taking effect. Tell us more about the latest, what you're hearing.
Right. Well, this is something that is not new. If you look at previous rounds of conflict between Israel and Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza, when a ceasefire is announced, then the sides are trying to achieve objectives up to the very last minute, until which that is no longer possible based on the dictates of the ceasefire. So those launches from Palestinian Islamic Jihad, mostly on southern Israel at this point.
Really important to note as well, just stop you there for a second. What we are seeing on the screen now is live images from the Gaza Strip, as you can see there. And Alec, please continue with your thoughts.
Right, so Palestinian Islamic Jihad trying to score still some final points before the ceasefire comes into effect, because they didn't really have that image of victory, so to speak, that maybe they were seeking. Sometimes in these previous rounds, there is an Israeli who was seriously injured, a serious damage that you can see, a casualty, and none of that has really happened on the Israeli side. So now, once the ceasefire comes into effect, and assuming it holds, now the PR battle starts, where each side is trying to present itself as the victor in this exchange. And from Israel's perspective, if you look at it, just looking at the numbers, the fact that not a single Israeli was killed, that they managed to take out Taysir Jabari, that Islamic Jihad commander in the first strike, and then also Khalid Mansour and his deputy in the southern part of the Gaza Strip in Rafah. And but also from Israel's perspective, maybe even more important is the fact that they were able to strike Palestinian Islamic Jihad without getting Hamas involved, and also being the initiator in this case, not waiting for rockets to strike Israel, but rather being the first one to strike in this case, of course, based on that ever-present threat that was in the south with the roads that were blocked several days before. And that is also something that is sending a message to the groups in Gaza that they are not necessarily safe, that leadership, even when they are not firing the rockets, and changing the equation, which is something that a lot of Israelis were waiting to see for years, and this time happened.
Mary, I know that Alec already touched on how there's a lot of barrages usually in the lead up to a ceasefire, and we are seeing that now with red alert sirens going off in the southern cities and in the Gaza Strip as well. What do you think the terms of this ceasefire firstly will entail, and secondly, what kind of message usually do these militant groups try to send when they fire off so many rockets at the last minute like this?
Well, I think Alec put it very well, sending this message at the last minute. Everybody wants to get the final word. Everybody wants the last word in this conflict. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad wants to prove that they weren't demoralized, they weren't defeated, while still accepting this ceasefire from Israel and then backing down. Israel at the same time, there's still rockets being fired at them. They will respond and target what we're hearing now to be rocket launchers inside the Gaza Strip. As for the other part, the question of what is actually coming in these proposals, we don't really know. We know the Islamic Jihad has made a number of demands, but Israel on its part says it will not accept a ceasefire. That entails demands, saying that what they are putting on the table is an offer for a ceasefire, and that alone. They're not going to set any demands, but the Islamic Jihad said they made it very clear to the Egyptian mediators who were trying to formulate this deal and who have apparently allegedly done so, that one of the main tenets is, one, allowing some of the access into the Gaza Strip. This includes crucial supplies, essential medicines, fuels, things like this is the immediate priority for the Gaza faction to try and take care of its people. This is one thing of any ceasefire. This will be top of the line, is the humanitarian aspects. The Islamic Jihad is also trying to get the release of 2 prisoners, one administrative detainee who's on hunger strike that Israel has been holding, as well as Bassem el-Sadi, so the West Bank leader of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, who was arrested last week in Jenin, and that really was the trigger for this escalation that we are seeing now. It's unclear if Israel will actually accept this, especially in recent years. They have not been very willing to take on prisoner exchanges, especially in terms of ceasefires. They say they're going in to address these terror targets, and then they're getting out. That's their end of the line. They won't accept any of these kinds of concessions, demands from the Islamic Jihad, but the Islamic Jihad is saying this is the only way they'll accept them. We'll have to see what actually comes out after 11:30 to see if there were any agreements made, or both sides saying they're put these things forward. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad also posturing to say, well, the Egyptians at the very least said that they would work to make sure these prisoners were released, that they at least had received declarations that Egyptians would fold it into the portfolio. So maybe also offering a caveat, a room out for the Islamic Jihad to
right, and just to stop you there, Mary, as well, again, live images on your screens of rocket interceptions there by the Israeli Iron Dome missile defense system. Alec, I just want to quickly go to you. What do you think Hamas thinks about all of this, everything that's unfolding? How do you think they view this conflict currently?
Right. Well, Hamas, as the ones who actually are in charge of the Gaza Strip and potentially have more to lose, they decided not to get involved in this round. But look, in the end of the day, there will be another round at some point, probably with Hamas. Hamas ideologically are not that different from Palestinian Islamic Jihad. They're a bit more pragmatic because they have larger responsibilities inside the Strip. They're the ones also who receive the aid money from Qatar. They're the ones who have the more direct contacts with Egypt. They're the ones who are in charge of the work permits that allow people to go out and work in Israel, and that is in jeopardy when these operations are taking place. And Islamic Jihad are the more agitators who are willing to kind of launch rockets more indiscriminately. We saw that with the former commander Baha Abu al-Atta was taken out back in 2019, and with the threats that they made now. So it's important to emphasize that there is not that great a gap between Hamas and Islamic Jihad. They also work together on many fronts. In the end of the day, Hamas did not get involved in this round, but it doesn't mean mean that their position is all that different from that of Islamic Jihad and everything that that entails when it comes to the future potential conflicts between the sides.
Mary, is there any point to this ceasefire currently, if we don't know what the terms of it are, and if we think that there might be another barrage of rockets coming up very soon? Like, take us through that process. Is there any point?
That's just the understanding that unfortunately has evolved between Israel and the Gaza Strip in recent years. You have these big flare-ups, you have these escalations, these bouts of violence. Many people are killed. There's some sort of ceasefire truce agreed, and Egypt and the UN and Qatar also have been involved in these long-term efforts to reach a ceasefire. But again, we see it devolve into this. But the most important thing, there is a point to the ceasefire. It's going to allow critical aid into the Gaza Strip, which is currently struggling from these deadly strikes, including fuel, things like that, to actually keep the blockaded strip running. So at least for on the Gaza side, it is very important. And Israel says it's achieved all its missions, so it doesn't need to keep fighting.
Thank you so much, Mary McAuliffe and Alec Pollard here in the studio, our diplomatic and Middle East correspondents, with all those details. We're leaving you on these live images now with rockets being intercepted by the Iron Dome missile defense system. Thank you for watching. I'm Sarah Shalala.